everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Welcome to the dramatic conclusion of American One. Alright, so today we're going to be talking about some expansion of industry here in the late 1800s, as well as railroads, with the Transcontinental Railroad. Cool stuff to talk about here. Alright, let me make myself smaller. Boop, 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 boop. Alright, so the expansion of industry. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today are inventors and inventions. Alright, a lot of cool stuff here. So the first guy we're going to talk about here, alright, is Edwin L. Drake. Alright, so Edwin L. Drake, who I believe is this dude. It is him. Alright, Edwin L. Drake comes up with a new way to drill for oil. Now, what's cool about this is that it's going to fundamentally change the fabric of society as we become dependent on oil. Prior to his idea that we're getting ready to talk about, the way you found oil is you dug a huge hole in the ground, all right, and you just hoped it filled up with oil. Like, they knew it was underground, they just didn't know how to get to it, all right? Oil is really important at the time because kerosene was important. Kerosene is how you used light. All right, so everybody had like kerosene lanterns, so kerosene was really important, and you got it from oil. So everybody needed oil. So what he decides to do is he's like, hey, what if I just, and so you might be thinking like the oil wells, well, this is a crude origination of it, is to use like a big drill that goes into the ground and like poke holes in the ground, and when you hit oil, it'll come shooting out. All right, this is the idea. We know today that's exactly what happens. He's the guy who came up with it. It's almost like a Hollywood movie. If it was something more enjoyable than trying to find oil, it would be that he finally convinces enough people that it's a really good idea. So they give him enough money to try it 100 times. 99 times it doesn't work because he hasn't found oil. And then on the 100th and final try, he does find oil, and it revolutionizes the oil industry. Here's what's interesting. Now that oil is very prevalent, the price of kerosene goes down. Well, when you take oil and you get kerosene out of it, you have this waste that nobody knew what to do with it. They were just throwing it away. The waste is called gasoline. It's too explosive. Like, you don't put that in a lamp. It's like a grenade. So the gasoline are kind of throwing away. They didn't know what to do with it, which is when the automobile comes out. The fact that the cars run on like waste from the oil was like, look how efficient this thing is. Obviously, it's kind of gone the other way today. But Edwin L. Drake is famous for coming up for a new way of drilling for oil. Thomas Edison. Now, Thomas Edison, if you've heard about him, Thomas Edison is a good guy, great inventor. There's a little controversy with Thomas Edison. I'm not saying he's a bad guy. I'm not saying completely throw out everything you know about him, but theirs is not as cut and dry. So Thomas Edison comes out at the time and is a super famous inventor. What Thomas Edison invents is not the light bulb. He doesn't invent electricity or the light bulb. What he creates is a light bulb that's actually usable. So so when he's given credit for creating the light bulb, that's not completely not correct, but people had figured out how to get things to light up. They just burn out in like 30 seconds. He figured out how to use a filament and like fill it with a certain type of gas. Like, still, if you take a light bulb and drop it on the ground, it'll pop because it's like pressurized gas inside. That's what Thomas Edison came up with. Another thing that he invented is the phonograph. Do y'all know what the phonograph is? The phonograph is a record player. You record it and it'll play it back to you. Keep this in mind. Prior to the late 1800s of Thomas Edison inventing the phonograph, nobody had music in their life unless somebody was playing it live. That was it. The only time you ever hear music is if somebody's playing it. There is no recordings because there's nothing to play it back on. That's crazy. That's only been around for like a little over 100 years of human existence, of having music at your disposal to play it. he famously, when he creates the phonograph, doesn't really know what to do with it. So he's like, huh. So he records himself saying, "Here, boy, here, boy, here, boy, here, boy." And then he invites all his friends over, and they get in his parlor, and they got all the people stand on one side of the room, and he puts the phonograph on the other side of the room, and then calls his dog in, and then has the phonograph turn on, saying, "Here, boy, here, boy, here, boy," and he doesn't say anything, just to watch his dog be confused. Like, that's the man's a genius, and that's the first thing he could figure out to do with his phonograph. But Thomas Edison comes out and is very influential at the time period with the new inventions and new innovations and things like that. So that brings us to these guys, Tesla and Westinghouse. All right, and this is Tesla and Westinghouse defeat Edison. So Thomas Edison here, all right, he wanted to use, so he was a big supporter of electricity. He didn't invent it, but it's more of a discovery than an invention. But so what he wanted to do is use direct current. That might not mean anything to you right now, but you'll need to understand that here in a second. He wanted to use direct current, which means he wanted to use electricity that's not real dangerous. You can stick your finger in it and ouch, but you're not going to die from direct current. What you have to do though is you have to have a generator at the house. So each house has to have their own little mini power station to have this. All right. So one of Thomas Edison's guys that worked for him, all right, there's a guy named Tesla, all right, Nikola Tesla, which is him. He came up with this idea of alternating current, all right, which basically can send power really far away. So you can have one power station in the middle of a town. Well, it's extremely dangerous because that type of electricity will kill you, all right? Well, so when he presents this, because he was working for Thomas Edison's like, "No, that's dumb." Tesla's like, "Well, I would like to not work for you anymore and go take my idea to somebody else." And Edison's like, "Fine, that idea will never catch on. It's dangerous." So he takes his idea to Westinghouse. Westinghouse and Tesla team up and create the alternating current because, so light bulbs, are designed to work either on alternating current or direct current. So in the late 1800s, it was what's going to take place? If you use alternating current, it will allow poor people to have electricity because you can have one power station in town, whereas the direct current only allows rich people to have electricity. But direct electricity, the direct current is a lot safer than the alternating current. So which one's going to win out? And it's a huge battle between these two because Thomas Edison does not want people to go with alternating current because he has invested heavily in direct current. Thomas Edison, and the story's pretty intricate. Thomas Edison, to prove to everybody how awful alternating current is, all right, and how evil alternating current is, he invents the electric chair. That's right. The electric chair was a publicity stunt to execute people in, all right, to show how evil the alternating current is. The first guy they electrocute, they fry him and he doesn't die. And they have to fry him again and they basically had to cook him in the chair. Yeah, the alternating current is, it's brutal, but the fact that is how the electric chair got designed was through a publicity stunt. It's one of the most inhumane things that I can imagine dying. What? So Tesla and Westinghouse, it ends up winning out in the large part because, first off, people aren't, everything is dangerous in the 1800s. You're going to die bear attacks. Something's going to get you. So people weren't necessarily as terrified of it, but the idea that it was widespread and it could reach a lot more people, the alternating current will end up beating out Thomas Edison's concept of a direct current. And that's what we use today is alternating current. And I don't know of anywhere that uses a direct current. All right. Alexander Graham Bell. He invents the telephone. Man, the telephone changes everything. So the telegraph, yeah, you can beep, 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 but you had to have somebody on each side that could decipher it and all this other stuff. The telephone. So Alexander Graham Bell invents the telephone. You talk about a speed of communication. You don't have to learn how to decipher. You don't have to learn Morse code. The telephone drastically speeds up communication and is desperate need to get information back and forth as fast as possible. This is a picture of Alexander Graham Bell with his invention, which is the telephone. All right. This, and we're going to talk about it a lot over the next, as far as U.S. history goes, really for the rest of the course. There's this guy named Henry Bessemer. Henry Bessemer creates something called the Bessemer process, because when you create something cool, you name it after yourself. So Henry Bessemer creates the Bessemer process. The Bessemer process is the idea that you can make steel cheaply. So people had known how to make steel for a really long time. Like you got Middle Ages making swords out of steel and things like that. It's just a really, really, really difficult process, because here's what you do, and I want to super simplify it for you. All right, you take iron, which is like iron ore. It's like a natural mineral that comes out of the mountains. All right, and you melt it down. All right, or it's like liquid lava. You can see all this junk floating around inside it. All right, when it cools, it turns into iron, which is really heavy and it's strong, but it is brittle and it can break. So to make steel is when iron is in the liquid stage, all that junk floating around inside it, you need to get it out. Now, how you gonna get the junk out of liquid lava? Like just reach in there with a spoon, like you're not gonna pull up a spoon. So people knew to make steel, you gotta get all the junk out of iron. But how can you do it? So for thousands of years, maybe not thousands, we'll say 4,000 years, people have known what needs to be done. They just don't know how to do it. It's a very difficult concept. And steel is drastically better than iron in every category. It's a fraction of the weight. It's like 10 times stronger. It doesn't break. It'll slightly bend, but it doesn't break. Iron will snap. So for like building materials, steel is absolutely superior. Henry Bessemer is going to create this thing called the Bessemer process, and it's going to revolutionize everything. He's like, hey, so if we need to get that junk out, why don't we, and there's a bunch of drawings. They're actually a lot more complicated than I'm making it out to be right now. So don't go try to make steel at home, but I'm trying to simplify it as easy as possible for you. He's like, what if you put a whole bunch of liquid iron that's melted down and like boiling lava hot inside this machine, and then you pour it into this bucket. While it falls through the air, you like shoot hot air through it, and it'll knock out all the particles, and the only thing that will land is the stuff that will turn into steel. That's how they figured it out. Shoot hot air through it as it falls, and it blows out all the particles. And you have steel. And everybody's like, why didn't we think about that 1,000 years ago? And now, that's a super simple explanation. This is the simplest picture I could find, too. It's actually a lot more complicated than that. But it's easy to replicate. Like, smart people can do it. So all of a sudden, you have as much steel as you want. It is going to revolutionize buildings and all this other stuff. You can get skyscrapers. All this stuff comes out now because of the Bessemer process and the ability to mass produce steel. All right. This is Henry Scholes. Oh, I about made myself disappear. Actually, I did make myself disappear. Christopher Scholes. This is not Dr. Scholes and the insoles. If y'all are familiar with Dr. Scholes insoles, which go in whatever. What this guy does is create the typewriter. Now, he doesn't actually invent the typewriter. He invents the QWERTY keyboard. You know what a QWERTY keyboard is? It's a keyboard. Because right here, all right, different letters, blah, 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 blah. When you typed really fast, it would get jammed. He figured out if you reorganize the keys, so the keys the way they are on the keyboard now, this dude organized it that way so the keys wouldn't get stuck when you use it on old school typewriters. Now that we use a computer, it's not necessary, but people still use it this way, all right? And they still have it. It's called a QWERTY keyboard, QWERTY, all right? Do you know why it's called a QWERTY keyboard? About half of y'all do. The other half have never thought about it or have never heard it. Here's why. Here's my keyboard. See if I can show it on the camera here. Right, where am I? Right there. QWERTY. Top right corner, or top left corner. It spells it. QWERTY. It spells on every keyboard in the world. And because of that, it's referred to as a QWERTY keyboard. All right. Now, railroads. All right. Railroads were in super high demand. What we needed, though, is we needed a transcontinental railroad. This is the big mamma jamma, and this is really going to fundamentally change America from this point on, where you can divide it into two different courses. It's kind of before and after the Transcontinental Railroad. The Transcontinental Railroad, after we've spread out all over the country, they're going to try to build railroads from each side of the country and come together and connect. So you can literally travel from one side of America all the way over to California if you wanted, all right, by railroad. Because right now it's horse and wagon. It's very dangerous. If you create a transcontinental railroad, the speed at which you can travel, it doesn't take months. You can get there in days. Fundamentally will connect the United States. Now, most of the places where this needs to be built at is in wild, crazy, hostile country that is extremely dangerous to exist in, to live in, to function, to even visit or to go through. And you have to build a railroad, all right? Who in the world is crazy enough to build railroads in the middle of nowhere? The Chinese, all right? In the United States, America is going to allow Chinese immigrants to come in from the West Coast because there's a lot of workers needed to build the Transcontinental Railroad. And so a lot of American decisions are racially motivated at the time, all right? And almost every single time it's a really bad racial stereotype. This one is also a racial stereotype, but the logic is, well, the Chinese want to come in and they're willing to do this like suicide job. I mean, they did build the Great Wall of China, and that's the logic. They already done built something huge over there. That race of people must be good at building big things. And so the Chinese Americans, the Chinese immigrants, come into the United States and are used very heavily on the West Coast, all right, building towards the center of the country, whereas the Irish are going to come in from the East Coast and start working together as well. So the Irish immigrants, ex-Civil War soldiers, they're going to start from the East Coast, right? And they're going to start working towards the center of the country. And the Chinese are going to work from the West Coast and start working to the center of the country. So I always wondered, and I was like, if they're starting from both sides, it's like drawing a line at both sides on a paper. When they get all that across, like, are they super accurate where they were like, beep, perfect? Or did they like draw like, oh crap, like, boop, and have to do that? So I looked at a map of it. That's literally what happened. Look, like they came this way, they came this way, and then they're like, oh crap, we're not straight. And then they had to go up and connect it like this. But this is the Transcontinental Railroad. So Chinese immigrants is going to cause a problem because we were letting the Chinese immigrants in when the Transcontinental Railroad was being built. As soon as the Transcontinental Railroad gets built, there's not enough jobs here to support all those Chinese immigrants, and you see a lot of hostility come out against Chinese immigrants after the Transcontinental Railroad is completed. The blue section here was mainly completed by poor Irish immigrants and ex-Civil War soldiers. This here is a super famous picture of them all being together. You're not going to find any minorities here, even though it was the Chinese that built it. These are all kind of the foremen, the guys that were in charge. These aren't any of the actual laborers, but this is a famous picture of the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. You see these guys up here with like the champagne bottles and these two trains and shaking hands from the east and west have met. So this is a very famous photograph. The blurry stuff here, so the photographs, you had to stand still for like a minute solid in order to have a clear picture taken. So this guy probably sneezed like in that minute, and that's how it works. And you can see the blurry stuff. So there are some really high quality pictures if you don't move. So these guys had to like stand perfectly still for quite a while in order to have their picture taken. It's also why people don't smile in pictures in the 1800s. All right, is because it's not instantaneous. If you need to stay there as relaxed as possible, like. That is why nobody smiles, is because keeping a smile, like your face will be all blurry, and it was really expensive to have a picture taken. So that is why everybody wasn't just super angry back in the 1800s. It was, you just had to be as relaxed as possible to get the clearest picture possible, because it would take like over a minute for the actual picture to happen. So all of these guys had to stand here as motionless as possible for like a minute. That's why there's not any real battle shots of battles, but like pictures of like dead bodies on the field afterwards. At the conclusion of the Transcontinental Railroad being built, brings us to the conclusion of American One.